conflict resolution. This is from the Institute of Social and Emotional Intelligence. So, if you guys know my work, my name is Amelie, and I am the founder and chief embodiment officer of Solastic Intelligence. Solastic Intelligence is here to show you where in your body it is important to be holding emotional intelligence, social intelligence. They go hand in hand. And this is how you can better relate with people. And a big part of this is conflict resolution. And a lot of us have a hard time in our society with resolving conflict in a good way that is beneficial for all. So, if you guys are interested, I have a conflict assessment style. If you're interested, just comment in the comments below and maybe I'll put together something where we can discuss that. But I want to go over just really quickly some of the core competencies of what conflict management is. Now, if you know what emotional intelligence and social intelligence are, great. But for those that don't know what I'm talking about, emotional and social intelligence holds 26 different pillars in different areas. So it looks at the self and how aware you are of yourself and of how you manage yourself. And then it looks at others, the social part of how well you are aware of others and how well you manage with others. And so conflict management is one of the 26 pillars that are in these four categories. And so people with this competency, according to social and emotional intelligence, the ISEI.org, people with this competency will be able to handle difficult individuals and groups of people in tense situations with diplomacy intact. So if you've ever taken a diplomacy intact course, it is to really deal with or increase your awareness of conflict management. People with this competency are also able to spot potential conflict, okay, and bring the disagreements that the group has or they have with the group or with people to people. Hi, Ranjith Chowdhury. Hello, how are you? They're able to spot potential conflict. They're able to bring the disagreements out into the open. MD, welcome. And they're able to help de-escalate those issues. They're also able to encourage debate and have an open discussion about really difficult things, even the conflict. Pogio, hello, and Suhail, hello. Hi, guys. Thank you and welcome. They're also able to draw out all parties. Oh, today we're talking about conflict resolution. Um, so they're able to draw out all parties, understand the different perspectives that are going on within the group, where the conflict is, where the potential conflict is, and really get ahead of it before it becomes a bigger issue. Thank you. Yes, please subscribe if you guys are here. And the other thing is they're able to find a common ideal that everyone can endorse. So they're able to compromise all the perspectives, all the ideas, and come up with a win-win-win situation. So that's what people that have good conflict management skills are able to do. Now, people that lack this competency, and you might find that you sit in both of these categories, is they're uncomfortable with and tend to avoid conflict. They also lack consideration and tact when voicing their disagreements. In fact, they often present their arguments in a way that actually creates hostility instead of restoring the peace and creating harmony within the group. They also fail to listen to others' points of view when the disagreement arises. Thank you for the sub. I am from America. I live in America. So if they're not listening to another's point of view, when the disagreement arises, they're just shutting off, then you're you're dealing with somebody that's lacking in this competency, and this skill is very important, and it's extremely important as we go into the future of what our culture and lifestyle looks like, especially with, you know, my huge mission of ending toxic workplace culture. We have to learn how to resolve conflict and resolve it in a way that everyone feels supported and heard from their perspectives. People also who lack this competency cannot seem to find, see, or propose ideas of common ground. And they tend to focus solely and robustly on their own point of view. So instead of looking at the other's perspective and really just embodying why would they have that perspective and really have this genuine curiosity of, okay, this person's perspective is because of this. And now when I have my own point of view, instead of doing that, they're just like, no, my point of view only, and anything that you say is not going to dissuade me. This happened. Somebody had posted a TikTok video on gerrymandering, and I went in and I said, you know, the core issue, the root cause of why everyone is so in up in arms about the gerrymandering, which is, you know, changing the district redistricting basically. It isn't because they think that they have all this power. It's because this us against them mentality has been promoted for such a long time and is so acceptable. And I can think of many times in the past when, you know, things were going on when a certain party held, you know, held power, whatever that means, when a certain party held power and they, you know, exerted their force over the other side. And so it's just been this really strong us versus them. And I had a gentleman call me out and say, "You don't even know what you're talking about. You need to, you know, put the receipts." So, you know, I said, "Well, cancel culture. Cancel culture targeted another side, and it caused this disharmony and threat against them." So, you know, this gerrymandering topic is no different. You know, it's targeting another side. Like instead of looking at how can we work together, it really is an us versus them. Now we have power, and now we're going to exert our power and control and manipulation over the other side. The guy, though, that was arguing with me, and when I said, you know, cancel culture is a huge thing, he's like, well, you're not doing your duty. He just assumed that I wasn't doing anything to help bring positive change into the world. And he couldn't see my perspective. He was so blind to it. And I was like, you know, the fact that you're reacting this way is telling me that you're proving my point and you don't see from my perspective what is going on here. Sorry, you won't understand. Hi, Mike. Hi. Thank you, Ranjith, for the sub. So really what I'm saying is, you know, at the end of the day, that gentleman was unable to see my perspective from the things that I had observed, even though I was sharing it, you know, very easily. I wasn't pointing fingers at him. I was saying, you know, the way that you're reacting right now is, you know, that's one of the core issues is you're reacting. You're not looking at it from a rational perspective. If you were looking at it from a rational perspective, you would be able to pull yourself out of your position and see things from my point of view. And so that is a core lack of competency in conflict management. So because I wasn't this or that, and I couldn't label myself as on his team, he rejected anything that I said and laughed it off. And I was like, it's that thinking that is going to continue. It's not just gerrymandering. There's other things that happen that cause conflict. But because you cannot see my perspective, because you are demanding that I be a certain type of way in holding the other side, the other focus. Had your food, sorry, my mistake. um, cool. So the other thing where people lack conflict management, which is just like conflict management at the base is just effectively negotiating and resolving disagreements. Effectively negotiating and resolving disagreements. Okay. So if you can orchestrate win-wins, if you can draw out the parties, understand the different perspectives, and come to a common ideal that everyone will agree with, then you have that, you hold that competency. But if you see other people as opponents, like I said, the us versus them, and you try to find solutions that serve just yourself or your party or your side or, just you, and you're not looking at how do I connect with others, then your core competency in conflict management is going to be poor competency. And how are you going, like, negotiation happens on all levels. You decide whether or not you can say yes or no to something. It's like you know that you hold this authority and power within yourself to say yes or no to something. The last thing that the Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence discusses about people who lack this competency of conflict management is they fail to see what part they may be in creating the problem. So instead of saying, I had a hand in this from this perspective, they're looking at blaming the problem on somebody else, and then the conflict is on others. It's not them. There's nothing that they did to create the conflict. When in fact, if there is a conflict, there's two parties or multiple parties that are not in agreement in some form or another. And this is what's contributing to a toxic political space. It's contributing to a toxic business space, and it happens within families. I mean, this is everywhere. So if we're going to be having competency in conflict management, we'll talk about the styles here. We're wanting to effectively negotiate. We're wanting to resolve disagreements. We want to have a win. We want to have harmony. I agreed with you. Oh, that's awesome. Sorry, I won't. Ranjith, I'm having a hard time following your conversation. I don't know what you mean that you won't. So when we're looking at how do I improve my negotiation skills? How do I improve resolving disagreements? There's 5 different ways to do this according to the social and emotional intelligence. One of them is a collaborative approach. So the collaborator is looking to manage the conflict and figure out, okay, this is where everybody sits with their different perspectives, and now let's collaborate. Let's put it all on the table and figure out what the best method is to get to our goal. What is our goal? Let's figure out what steps we need to do to get there. Compromising is another way of conflict management. So compromising is, you lay everything out on the table and everyone's like, okay, I want this. And, compromising means that you might have to take away one of the least towards the goal that you want, and laying that down in favor of something that you truly do want. So really looking at that in that perspective. This is an approach that is used when a win-win is not possible. So you have to renegotiate and figure out, okay, there's some wins that I'm willing to accept, and then there's some wins that, I'm going to things that I wanted to win, I'm going to have to lay down. The next style is accommodating. So the accommodator is approaching conflict by maintaining all the relationships, all the interpersonal relationships. They're accommodating. They're going to possibly lay down everything. They're going to lay down everything, and maybe their personal goals are going to be removed from the conflict in favor of just having harmony in the workplace or in, whatever the conflict is. So this might look like giving in or appeasing the other side to avoid conflict. And avoiding is another style. So avoiding is avoiding all issues of the conflict and just laying down everything. So it's just really being evasive in their conflict management style. Now, all of these serve to have good value. However, obviously, we likely want to have a more collaborative approach to really hone in on all of the styles. How can we collaborate so that everybody has their wins? That way, everybody is a party to it. I'll talk about one of my situations here in a moment. So personal goals are not going to be met in this, but also there's a risk of losing out on the interpersonal relationships that you have with the avoidance style. Now, we'll talk a little bit about why the avoidance style might be valuable, but it's not one that you necessarily want to go to all the time. If we do a go-to, we definitely want to be sitting in that collaborative approach instead of these other styles all the time. And then the final approach is the competitive or controlling approach. This one is where competitors' approach to conflict takes necessary steps to make sure that his or her personal goals are met, whatever the cost of the relationship. So they're not looking at if I'm going to be competitive or I'm going to be controlling, I'm not looking at long term. I'm just looking at how do I get my stuff met? How do I control and manipulate the situation or coerce people into believing that my position, that my goals are the most important? The conflict is viewed as a win-lose situation where that if you don't win, that is some form of lack of self-worth. Like your worth is tied, or status or competence are tied to the results of the conflict. So if you don't win, then you lack self-worth or lack self-competence. But if you do win, then you have power and authority over the situation. So, like I said, all of these might be used in a certain degree. But let's talk about developing these things. So if you feel that you were sitting in some of the competencies, like the positive aspects of this, or maybe in some of the lacking of this competency, and you want, I don't think you don't reply me. Yeah, I'm trying to follow Ranjith. Okay. So let's talk about development tips. So when you are looking at how do I improve effective negotiation skills, or how do I improve resolving disagreements, when you're in a conflict or heated discussion, the thing that you can do is become really self-aware. And we'll talk about some of the questions that you might ask yourself in those moments. But you'll want to become self-aware in that moment of, what is the issue? And can I separate myself personally from it and just look at what is the core issue? Can I separate the people from the core problem? So instead of looking at the personalities or looking at their positions, look at what the core problem is and start from there. That way it's not an us versus them approach. It's more of a what is really being said here. What is the true root cause issue of why there's a conflict here or the potential conflict that can arise? What is going on? The other thing is to ask, what can I say or do that will make this a more productive conversation? So instead of, saying like, you're wrong. My mom always said, like, don't use you statements when you're talking about, resolving a conflict or at any point in time. I think me and my brothers fought a lot when we were younger, which is normal sibling rivalry. But she would tell me all the time, don't use you statements, use I statements because you don't want to speak for others. It's better to speak for yourself and speak up about your needs and whatever your position is in the way that you're experiencing it, instead of saying like, you did this, you did that, you. That kind of is just like picking and starting a fight, antagonizing or initiating conflict. The other thing, a development tip, is don't avoid conflict, okay? So conflict is going to linger if it's not addressed, and then it'll get worse and worse. And it's a little more difficult to deal with it later than to initially, like, upfront say something. So I've avoided conflict. I'll admit to that. I've avoided conflict, and in doing that, it kind of made it a little bit more difficult later on for me to voice like what the true situation was. So I was at work and I was working, and instead of speaking up for myself and saying, "Hey, I work a whole lot. It's almost too much to manage, and how can we resolve this? Because right now it's starting to affect my health." And I even think I spoke up about it, but I wasn't very clear on it. And that's why having a regulated nervous system is so important, because it will give you a lot of clarity around the situation. Really, the root cause of what was happening, and what I couldn't see it at the time, but I was bringing it to my manager. My manager was unable to really mete out what the true issue was going on. Was that the decisions that were happening were causing me to feel excluded from the team. And it's really interesting because, it's like you have these businesses that are like one team, one, whatever the business name is, one, whatever, meaning that everybody is incorporated in it. But in that, I felt very excluded from that one team. I'm already in UK 2 years. Well, that's awesome. One thing I want to tell you. That's awesome. I hope that's a fun time. Hopefully one day I travel everywhere and I get to see the UK too. So don't avoid conflict, because it lingers and it will need to be dealt with sooner or later. And if you don't deal with it now, it becomes so much more difficult to deal with it later. And it wasn't until later that I realized that I was being excluded from that. And that's the word that was missing from my vocabulary of my feeling excluded. I was like speaking about it from all different other areas, but not just saying like, I was excluded. I feel excluded. And it's important to be able to have an open space to be able to say that. I didn't feel psychologically safe enough to do that. So the other thing is to be willing to change perspectives and consider a wider range of alternatives and options. So instead of digging your heels in and putting the walls up, of being open to, okay, what are the other perspectives here, and how is there a common denominator? Is there a common piece within all of this discussion, all of these perspectives that everyone can agree on? So you want to have that out in the open. Examine your intent while negotiating. So, I'm really, really good at negotiating business deals. And it's very interesting. I can negotiate business deals. I worked in procurement for, a little, almost well, a little over a decade, we'll say. And in that, I was able to learn how to negotiate business deals really well. However, when it came to negotiating for myself, I always put myself, I was very accommodating. Like, okay, I'll get mine later. But no, the real negotiation, the real way that you honor yourself and you honor your skills and your talent is to speak up and say something. Hey, this is all of my accolades. This is all of the things that I've done. And I'd really like to get a pay raise or a promotion for what I've done. And you're able to do that with confidence. Okay. So examine your intent while negotiating. And when you're examining your intent and you're looking at, okay, this is what I've given, and now, I'm asking to receive something in return for the exemplary, things that I've done. Or if you're going into a new job and you're negotiating your salary, you know, really think about I'm an expert. If you're over 10 years in a certain area, you're an expert. Okay? You have expertise in that field. And so really look at I'm an expert in my field. I'm confident that I can do the job, and I know that I've put a lot of work into my other jobs. Now, when I negotiate my salary or negotiate my position, now I'm going to go in confidently, knowing what my value is, and then deliver that in a way that doesn't create a hostile environment. Just say, these are my skills. This is my talent. I know what I'm worth. I'm worth this much. And this is how I want my contract to be. Okay. A big reason why I'm sharing this with you is because this is a huge part of negotiating. And if people are going to be going into business for themselves and they're going to be negotiating contracts, under their own business as an entrepreneur or as somebody that's in sales or even procurement, there's a lot of negotiation that goes on in those fields. Then you want to be able to deliver your negotiation in a way that isn't hostile. I had a manager who told me to become aggressive in negotiation, basically to be as hostile as possible, because that's what they had learned from their leader when they were in the field that we were in. And I had to say, no, I'm not doing that. I don't negotiate that way. I don't negotiate in a hostile way. I only negotiate in a way that is a win-win. Like I'm going to ask for something pretty wild and crazy in the beginning, but I have a certain number that I want to hit. And I know that I want to hit that certain number. My negotiation style for the work that I was doing, I was able, with the negotiation style that I had, it's not hostile. It's a very much a compromising negotiation style. I was able to have a cost savings of 3.4% of revenue because of the way that I was able to negotiate. Yeah, unions. So unions do their bargaining. And it's really interesting because I've been really fascinated with unions, not just from the digital age series that I was doing, but, the unions are going in and they're negotiating on your behalf. So you want to have people that are leading those unions for you that are able to negotiate effectively. So their conflict resolution or management skills are going to need to be really high. You want them having all of this not just diplomacy intact, but the ability to negotiate, the ability to have open discussions, the ability to confront really difficult situations. And you have to do that with a regulated nervous system. There's no way that you can go in with a dysregulated nervous system, go into a negotiation that's really heavy. Let's say it's like a multi-million-dollar deal. You're not going to be able to go into that with a dysregulated nervous system and come out winning. Because the moment something threatens you, the moment something triggers your survival mode, like your prefrontal cortex just shuts down and then you don't win. You know, you have to basically pull the avoidance piece of, okay, I'm going to have to step away from this moment instead of being there and just negotiating effectively for, you know, what you're asking for. You have to go in with confidence. And if you're going in with a survival mode nervous system, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to hold that difficult conversation. Wavetune Studio, you have beautiful eyes. You're beautiful. Thank you. Okay. So the, you know, at the end of the day, when I said no to my manager and said no to doing negotiations in a hostile way, you know, the real thing that he wanted me to do was to help my coworker become a little bit more courageous in stepping into those negotiations. My field typically, this is really common in my field. Typically, if you're in a purchasing or procurement setting and you're not bringing the things in that people need and you're, you know, dropping the ball, you not only have to deal with vendor to business, business to business conflict resolution, but you have to deal with interpersonal business conflict resolution as well. So if you miss bringing something in, like a purchase order doesn't get sent to the proper place or the proper email and get fulfilled, and then, you know, the time comes where that part is needed or that service is needed and it's not there, that's a conflict. And then all of a sudden they're like, where is my piece? And if you don't have confidence or you don't have an ability to take ownership for that and address it immediately and figure out the best way to resolve that issue, you're going to have a lot of people coming at you that can feel really uncomfortable. And especially if that system is dysregulated, because then you're going to be like, how can I best avoid this situation instead of being assertive about it? So conflict management requires a really strong personal power, which is that confidence, that self-worth. It requires that. That's all a part of self-awareness, but we're looking at how do we socially manage that. So we're kind of doing this little kitty corner of how can I manage others? Okay. So you've got to have that personal power. You've got to have that before you can really step into this conflict management with ease. Okay. So other things is with conflict management, another tip is to be creative and brainstorm and invent options for mutual gain. So if you're in a, you know, if you're in a negotiation, you've laid your cards on the table, they've laid their cards on the table, and there's no ability to see eye to eye, then start to get creative. Okay, well then what do we think about this? What do we think about that? You're not going to be able to be creative though. You're not going to be able to achieve that creativity, which is centered in this prefrontal cortex area. That's your executive function. You're not going to be able to achieve that if you're stuck in a dysregulated nervous system, which is the amygdala. It's just scanning for threats and trying to preserve as much dignity as possible. That's where the personal power comes into play. Like you've got to have that. You've got to know that you have really strong authority, really strong confidence, really strong knowledge-based skills to really get into that part of it. And then you can innovate on the spot. You can be creative on the spot. And then you know that, okay, I'm going to brainstorm even more ideas. And then maybe you go to others in the field or other, like your manager, other people in the field that you can garner more ideas of how do I resolve this problem. Okay. The other thing is to develop this is to insist on using data or some objective criteria to reach a resolution. So you want to really rely on the data. If you're relying on emotion, like how you feel, or maybe even letting your feelings kind of turn you into whatever direction, when you rely on your emotions like that and you're letting your emotions lead, it can lead you into these gray areas where you might not want to deal with it, especially if you're not processing your emotions. So if you're unable to feel and accurately assess your emotional feelings, like whatever that emotion is, if you're unable to assess what that is and you're unable to process it in the time that it needs and avoid the emotions, when those emotions do come up, it's going to cause you to be a little flabbergasted. You're going to have a really difficult time, okay, trying to reach an objective because now you're relying on your subjective feelings. Now, some people do have emotional authority in their system as like the way that they kind of dictate, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. But for the most part, when you're dealing with conflict, you're really looking at objectively, what is the goal here? And can we merge the goal into one where we can have a win-win situation? So really having that self-awareness, not just personal power, but emotional self-assessment and being able to do so accurately, assess where your emotions are. Because really, an emotion should only be about 90 seconds. If you feel anger, it should only be about 90 seconds. So just, if you need to like remove yourself from the situation, do that. Just say, hey, look, I just need a couple minutes. Let me go feel let me go take a moment for myself. You don't have to say I'm going to go feel my anger, right? Just say, I need to take a moment for myself and think a little bit deeper about this and excuse yourself. People will be really accommodating to you if you say it that way, right? I just need to go excuse myself for a moment. Just take a little break and think about this. Then when you do that, you'll want to feel that emotion, whatever it is. It could be anger, it could be frustration, it could be, yada, 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 whatever the feeling is. Yeah, 90 seconds. Whatever the feeling is, you just go and feel it. You just got to imagine okay, I'm feeling anger. And imagine it like starting in your belly or in your root area, and then just imagining it kind of working its way up through you and feeling it. And then, I always like to ask, why am I feeling anger in this moment? Why am I feeling anger in this moment? It's there for a reason. It's protecting me. Maybe my fight response is like coming up. I feel like fighting through this. But, you can say, do I really want to fight? Do I really want to try and control the outcome? Do I really want to do that? Or am I really looking for an objective win-win situation? Okay, so those are some questions that you can ask yourself. And then, later on, you can come back and, why did I feel angry in that negotiation? Why did that feeling come up? And then when you have time to kind of sit with that, you can go into your little memory banks and figure out, okay, maybe this situation happened in an earlier work experience and I felt like I wasn't being heard. And instead of speaking up about it, I was just really mad about it, but I didn't share how upset I was. And so now when I go to negotiate for myself, that feeling of anger is going to come up because it's reminding me of, something. I had a situation, gosh, was it last year, where I had a feeling of envy come up. And it just came up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gross. I'm not an envious person. But I had to sit with it for a second. So I sat with the envy, and I was like, that's really weird. And then the reason behind the envy, I was like, it was because somebody else was getting recognition and I wasn't. And so I was like, do I really want to be her though? Do I really want what she has? And the answer was no. And I was like, well, okay. But that feeling of envy still came up. And so I was like, all right, now I need to go. Now that I know that I don't want her position, I don't want her responsibility, I don't want to be her, where in my life did this happen? And I had to go all the way back to age 5 and 6, where I had stepsisters, and they would get lavished with gifts and lavished with attention, and I didn't. And so me seeing that, I had to rewrite the story in that. Okay, that's where the envy came from. That's why I'm feeling it now. Now I can address it. Now, 39 or 40-year-old me can address that situation from when I was 5 and 6 that I wasn't able to process in the moment, but I was watching it happen in real time. Okay? So that's an example of when you feel a feeling. It came up and it was just really quick. It should be about 60 to 90 seconds, any emotion. And if it's any longer, then it's sitting in your system and just wanting you to address it. Okay? And it'll keep coming up. Like I said, it was, a 35-year process where maybe envy did come up a few times in my life. And it wasn't until last year that I was able to really hone in on where did it come from and can I reroute this? And yes, I can. So the next piece is of development tips is being aware of other person's emotions in the conflict. They may be feeling angry or fearful, and you'll get your point across better if you can be responsive to their needs. So if you notice that you're in a negotiation or you're in a disagreement or there's a difficult conversation that you're trying to have, maybe you're a leader and you have to fire somebody and you can tell that they're afraid. They're afraid of anything that's going to come out of your mouth. That's a very difficult conversation. I think not just for the leader, but also for the other party that is potentially being fired or, sitting in what do they call them? A performance review or something like that, where they're like, I don't know what you're going to say. If you are a leader and that is happening, it means that you're not tuned into your team. You're not attuned to your team. You're not checking in with them enough. You're not creating a space of psychological safety. If you notice that they're angry or fearful, and that there's work that you need to do to make your team safe. Okay? Effectively negotiating means looking at, how am I a part of this? Is there something that I need to look into to accommodate my team? Because if a leader goes in and let's say they have somebody that's underperforming, that was a high performer before, but now they're underperforming. The answer isn't, it's them, not me. The answer is, it's me. And how am I contributing to them having a psychologically unsafe work environment that now they're withdrawing, now they're having low performance, instead of doing a performance improvement plan? It's not their performance that's the problem. I will stand by that. Maybe some people have that, but if you have a high performer that suddenly is performing low, you've created it. Sorry, I don't want to say you have. there may be a psychologically unsafe work environment that that person is experiencing, and it's not them. So putting a performance improvement plan on that person because they were a high performer and now they're not performing as well, and you know it. I had a manager that did that to me. I was a high performer. They even said, I know that you're capable of doing your job. I don't understand why you're not performing well. And they went to HR, they gave me a performance improvement plan. And the whole time I was sitting there looking at it, and all I could see was, Oregon is an at will employer, at will employment, which means that they can fire you on the spot and you have to leave that same day, but you can also quit on the spot. That's at will employment. That is your right as an employee. Okay. And you'll have to check with different states. And if you're not in the United States, you'll have to check with how they manage that. But just remember that. Like, if you're getting a performance improvement plan, maybe you need to speak up and say, hey, this is what's going on. I have too much workload. There's not enough hours. You've reduced my hours and then added even more work into what I'm supposed to do. There's no way that I can get this done. You'll have to pull something from my responsibilities. And we had already done that, but I still got a performance improvement plan. Paramesh, welcome. David C., welcome. I think you supported me, so I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I think it was you. I haven't logged into my Buy Me a Coffee yet, but thank you so much for that. All right, so the next piece of development with conflict resolution is to be a neutral. You might need to bring in a neutral third party if the conflict cannot be resolved between two parties. You did. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Some positive energy into my work over here. All right, now let's move on, because all of these conflict styles that I had discussed before we went through, the competencies, lacking competencies, and those development tips is when, like, every single conflict style, conflict resolution style is different, and it sometimes is necessary. So what the Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence says on this is everyone has their own characteristic approach or preferred style when it comes to managing conflict. Okay? Everybody has a different style. For example, a person may be characterized as being more or less aggressive, dominating, inflexible, dishonest, constructive, compliant, cooperative, competitive, and so on. So Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilman, thoughts on sanctuary cities violating federal law to protect illegals. Sanctuary city. Well, we have a justice system in America, and so the justice system is the way that those get resolved. And I have full confidence in our justice system to be able to manage that. It does take a long time to do it, though. Sometimes it can take months, sometimes it can take years to do that. But I have a lot of trust in our justice system in America. Okay, so Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilman in 1974 said these different approaches can be grouped into 5 categories. So there's 5 distinct categories of the conflict styles. And so one of them is competitive and controlling. And this works best when there's an emergency. Okay? So let's say the conflict is there's an emergency. Maybe there's a fight going on. A fight broke out at work. Okay? Fisticuffs happened. All right? So the competitive or controlling conflict style is probably best when that is going on because you need quick, decisive action. You don't want to sit there and say, oh, Tom and Jerry are fighting. They're throwing hands right now. How do we collaborate? Like, it's a high emotional situation, and that quick decision making is going to be vital. And that's where the amygdala brain comes in. This is very much amygdala hijack brain because you see the threat, and instead of saying, oh, let me wait a little bit of time until I'm in my rational brain, because it takes time to resolve the conflict. No, there's hands being thrown at the moment. So you need to have a quick, decisive action to address that. So in emergencies, the competitive or the controlling nature especially will work best in that situation. It also works best when there's an important issue or if that requires an unpopular action. So you just need to control the situation, get it done, and then later you can come back to it. Okay. Competitive or controlling is best when you know you're right, and that controlling that even in the moment, and you need to revisit it. Doing that in the moment is going to be more beneficial than it is to wait. Okay. The competitive controlling conflict style is also best when the other party would take advantage of the cooperative behavior. Yeah, fisticuffs. Yeah, Johnny, I would be curious to know what your opinion is on that. Okay. The next conflict style is collaborating. So, collaborating is best when the issues are too important to be compromised. Okay. Now, remember, compromising. Let me see if I could pull this out really quick. I'll show you guys. So, this is what Kilman and Thompson or Thomas and Kilman created. I don't know if you guys can see it from that perspective, but you have compromising there in the middle, and you can see avoiding, accommodating, aggressive or competitive, and then collaboration win win. This is when the concern for others is low or high, and the concern for yourself is low or high, okay? And kind of being in this middle ground is great, but obviously having high concern for self and high concern for others is really important. So you'll want to be kind of in this range over here for the most part, but sometimes you do have to sit and accommodate or maybe even do some of these others just until you're able to kind of come back to the situation. Okay. So collaborating is also, the objective is to integrate different points of view. So with collaboration, you're going to want to gain insight on what are your points of view. So you have this roundtable discussion of, okay, here's our goal, here's how we're going to achieve it. What are your objectives? What do you view as a win in this situation? Collaborating is also, you'll need commitment to make the solution work. So people do have to buy in and adapt to whatever the solution is. So you do need a little bit of commitment from all parties in order to make the solution work. And then collaborating is best when you wish to build or maintain an important relationship. So I know that some, especially sales people, will go into a negotiation before they even have the big contract negotiation. They'll do some things that will create a great rapport with you. And I've dealt with salespeople for a long time. Working in procurement, you have a lot of salespeople coming to you, so you need to be able to know how to address them, know what they're selling, know what their value is, know what the quality of the product is, and have a really good, solid rapport with them. Because in the moments that you have emergencies, because they do come up, that you're able to reach out to them and say, "Hey, I have this problem. What would you propose? How would you propose to resolve this?" And because you've developed this collaborative relationship with them, you may have to relent some of the things that you wanted from the negotiation. So the next conflict style is avoiding. So avoiding is best when the issues are not important. So sometimes the issues won't be that important. It's just kind of maybe it's a small ask. And so you're like, oh, okay, I'll just give in. I'm not going to like fight this or anything like that. There are no more pressing issues to tackle. There's no chance of achieving your objectives. So you'll be able to kind of foresee, where is this negotiation going? Where is this disagreement going? How is this difficult conversation going? Are there any objectives that I'm going to be able to achieve in that? Hi, Port. The potential aggravation of negotiating outweighs the benefits. So if you know you're going to go into a negotiation and the other party is not going to be bringing their objectives to the table, there's going to be really solid disagreements. You know that they're not going to hear your point of view. Maybe avoiding that situation is the best for that moment until you're able to come back and say, hey, I would really love to come to an agreement and figure something out. However, I think we need to change the terms. Maybe you need to bring in a third party. Maybe there's some other things that need to be hashed out before having that. So avoiding might be a better option until you guys can come to have that objective discussion and figure out what a solid goal is to achieve. Avoiding is also best when people need to cool down and regain their perspective. Again, just in that moment when I was saying, maybe you feel angry when you're trying to negotiate. If you go into a negotiation, like let's say for your salary, and you start to feel angry, you could say, hey, I just need a couple minutes to like think about what you've given. And a lot of people are accommodating to that. They'll say, okay, let's talk about this tomorrow. We'll set a time. But just make sure that you set a time for it. Set a date and time to say, I'd love to discuss this a little further. However, I need a little bit of time to think a little bit more about the offer that you're providing me, and then we can come back to the negotiation table. It's totally common, totally fine. But being able to speak up for yourself in those moments and say those things is really important. And you are, like I said, are not going to be able to do that if your system is dysregulated. You've got to have a regulated system. So taking some time might help you to go back to regulating. And if you're feeling anger or frustration or whatever, you can kind of sit in that and say, why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling frustration? Why am I feeling, ignited whenever we have this discussion? Avoiding is also best when others can resolve the conflict more effectively. So maybe you're in a difficult discussion, like you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, and your presence in there it's causing you to be reactive, be very emotional. Then really just pulling yourself away from that conversation and saying, you know what, I think it's best if I leave this negotiation to you guys. I'm not able to be effective in this. And you don't have to give reasons. You can be very neutral about it, but just say, I'm going to leave this negotiation to you guys to figure it out. And then the other reason avoiding might be best is you might need to collect more time, more information. So you might need more time to collect more information, is what I should have said. So avoiding, you don't have to do it in a just silence way. You can just excuse yourself, say, hey, I need a little bit more time to gather more data so that we can have the best resolution. Okay. So that's avoiding. The next one, so this is fourth, is accommodating. So accommodating is best. Oh, how much energy do I want to spill on this? How much energy do I want to spill on this is something we should ask ourselves. Yes, that is definitely that is definitely a question, and I have a lot of questions that I'm going to be talking about here in shortly after I go through the conflict styles. But yeah, the how much energy do I really want to spend going through this? If you're not seeing that your objective is going to be achieved, do I really want to spend all that energy doing that, or can I relinquish myself from the negotiating table, because at this moment I'm not adding value to it, and I don't see a way that I'm going to get any value out of it either. So I'm going to leave it to others. I'm just going to dismiss myself from the whole situation altogether. And that's okay. That's okay. Like, there's tons of other things to negotiate in life. So you don't have to be present for every single one of them. Like, think about how you're spending your energy, like David C. is saying. Think about how you're spending your energy, and is that the best way to exert your energy? Okay, so accommodating is best when you find out that you're wrong, or accommodating might be best when you wish to be seen as a reasonable party. When the issues are more important to the other party, you might be a little bit more accommodating. You can see that, those issues, they value it more, and you maybe don't value it as much as they do. And so you're like, I'm going to accommodate their needs because, I'm not really getting a lot out of this discussion or this negotiation or this resolution. Accommodating is also best when you wish to build credits for later issues. So, you know that in the moment, in whatever the difficult situation is or whatever the negotiation is, that you don't really feel tied to it, but there might be something else that you have more passion for. So instead of trying to, assert all your wins in this situation, you can say, you know what, I'm going to let you win. I'm going to let you win this. Like, I'm going to give you the objectives and goals that you want. I'm going to give those to you, knowing that in the future, you may have a passion project that you're working on that you want them to be on you want them to agree with you. So you want them to accommodate in this future negotiation or this future arrangement. And, you care about it, but you aren't really attached to the outcomes of the current negotiation, the current discussion. But you're thinking in the future, I want them to be on my side on that. I want them to accommodate for me. The other reason accommodating might work best is you wish to minimize loss when you're in a weak position. So your position is weak. You know that you're not going to necessarily achieve all the goals that you want in the current discussion, and so then you're just like accommodating. You're going to agree with whoever feels the most passionate about that. And then the final one is harmony and stability are more important than you achieving all of your objectives in that particular negotiation. And finally, the final conflict style is compromising. So compromising was in the middle of that square box. And compromising is best when issues are important, but you cannot afford to be too controlling, okay? The relationship is important, but you cannot afford to accommodate, okay? So as opposed to the relationship or the outcome or the objective isn't as important when you're doing the accommodating style. And a compromising one, there it's still important to you, but maybe there's things that are more important to you than others in your objectives. And so you go to what you truly want, and then kind of let go of some of the lesser things. And you can work on those later. Compromising also works best when opponents of equal power are committed to mutually exclusive goals. So if you're able to come up with goals that both parties are like, yeah, that sounds like it's a good win, then compromising is best. And you need to achieve temporary settlements to complex issues. So let's say that, the disagreement or the difficult conversation is an extremely complex issue. Like it has layers and layers and layers. And in order to kind of dig through that, you need to like do these temporary settlements until you can slowly get through, whatever the complex issue is. And so compromising might work best because now you're demonstrating I'm able to compromise, I'm able to maybe accommodate on some things. And or maybe I have a really strong position, and so I'm just going to be really picky and choosy on the things that I want, but I definitely want this. This is a priority, and these aren't as big of priorities. This one is the biggest priority. So you're able to compromise and find a temporary settlement until that full complex issue is achieved. Compromising is also best when you need to find an expedient solution under time pressure. So, again, like our justice system does take a long time until some complex issue is resolved. There might be a lot of appeals that go into it, and it might get to the Supreme Court. But we have this process where fairness is going to be reviewed, and it might be reviewed under several different jurisdictions until there's a resolution. But if you need an expedient solution to have something now that will help accommodate or you need to compromise, then you'll definitely want to do that if there is a time sensitive issue with that. And remember, we were talking about the competitive and controlling, where like it's immediate. Like we need to do something so that not only am I preserving myself, but we're just like the concern for others is not as high. I need to make a decision now in order for everyone's safety. So in emergencies, you might use that. This one is not necessarily an emergency, but it is important. Okay, so it's still is a priority. There's still a time crunch here, and so compromising will help kind of build until you can get to that win-win situation. And then compromising is also best when there's no other solution. It's the only alternative that is going to work. Like everybody's very hard pressed on their important priority. And so you've achieved a mutually exclusive goal, and now you're able to carry that out. Okay? So those are Thomas and Kahlman's 5 conflict styles that they're not all bad. They're necessary in certain situations. But if you're sitting in just always being aggressive, always being competitive, or always avoiding, and those are high for you, you should have a kind of a healthy mix of all of these. But if you're very low in collaborative win-win conflict style, that might be an area of improvement for you where you might be able to improve to be a little bit more effective in negotiating and effective in having those difficult discussions. Being able to go into a difficult situation and choose which style is going to suit best, and then, be able to revisit those conflicts and make sure that all parties have a collaborative win-win in those. All right. So, questions to ask yourself when sorting through a confusing or disturbing conflict. So, one of the questions that you can ask yourself is, how did I behave? If you're sorting through something that's confusing or disturbing, how did I behave? Okay. So, remember when I was talking about the PIP, the improvement plan that I got, I reflect on that quite a bit. That happened, 6 years ago. Was it 6 years ago? Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago. And I look at that now of how did I behave? Well, I didn't speak up when I needed to. I did say I have a lot of work. I'm not able to get all of these things done. At that time, I didn't know what a dysregulated or a regulated nervous system looks like and how it affected me. I didn't know about the entrainment of other people's emotions, other people's stress. Eventually, you tune into those things. So I didn't know that stuff. And then all I know is I can look back and say, how did I behave? I'm not blaming anybody for the things that I went through. I'm learning at what point should I have taken responsibility for myself, spoken up, and said something. But how did I behave? I just avoided, shut down when really I could have spoken up for myself. Was I able to in the moment? Probably not. I didn't know how to, but now I do. Okay. So how did I behave might also look like nonverbal behavior of like a stance that you take, gestures that you take, your tone of voice that you use, your facial expressions. Your body speaks nonverbally just as much as your voice does. So maybe there was a lot of nonverbal communication going on. However, like for me, if I was going to look at how did I behave, maybe I was using too much nonverbal communication and needed to use a little bit more verbal communication and be very clear of this is what I'm going through right now. This is my workload. This is the time that I'm given. And it's literally, I feel like my body is shutting down because it's impossible for me to see the other side. Okay. Other questions to ask yourself when you're sorting through a confusing or disturbing conflict is, what did I say? And really looking at, what did I say that caused this issue? Did Jack fit on the door with a rose? Some Titanic jokes. You know, that's a good question. I mean, he just like gave up. He's just like, whatever, I'm out. Um, Owen Benjamin did a really good, funny joke about that. He was like, I think she was on the door and he's like, did he really? He probably could have held on, but he didn't. Like he didn't hold on. I don't know how the full joke goes, but it was really funny. Other questions you can ask is, how did I feel in that moment during that confusing or that disturbing conflict? How did I feel? So you can think about how you felt in yourself. You can think about how the other person, maybe how you felt about the other person. Maybe they annoyed you. Maybe they, whatever the feelings are that you had with that person. How did you feel about the interaction? How do you feel about the relationship? Just looking at those different areas and kind of pulling together the data from that disturbing conflict or that confusing conflict to really identify what you need to sort through. You can ask, what were my thoughts? What were my judgments or what were my opinions? Was I did I have an attitude of whether I was right or wrong? Did I feel that there was fairness? Did I was there a responsibility that I had in that? What were my judgments? Was I judging the other person based on something that I've been holding in myself? I mean, a lot of times I think, man, I'm just like working nonstop and I see all these people goofing around at work. Are they working as hard as me? Do I have judgments about them? Do I have certain opinions about them that are affecting me, that are causing these disturbances or these confusing scenarios? The other thing is, like, during a conflict, you can ask yourself, what did I expect to happen? What was and is my goal of this potential conflict? What do I want to happen? What result am I looking for? What result am I searching for? So these are all questions that you're asking if you're having competency in conflict management. Who does this person remind me of? Maybe it reminds you of your parents, your siblings, maybe a cousin. It might be your fifth grade teacher. It might be, it could be anybody. Who does that person remind you of? And what are your feelings with that person? Happens often. I just told you guys a story of how it happened to me. What experiences, what earlier experience does this situation remind me of? What old pattern or tape did I get hooked by? So old patterns, like I said, with the envy situation, I had to like really ask myself a lot of questions in the moment of, why am I feeling this? Do I really envy that person's position? Or is this something that's sitting in my stories that I'm believing that I need to just address? So I took a trip in the Wayback Machine all the way back to age 5 and 6, where, I wasn't being considered and kind of felt a certain way. So there was an old pattern there that I needed to address. Like, this old tape was playing out, and now it was playing in this current situation. And instead of, holding on to that envy, I let it go. Like, oh, okay, I really don't want that person's position. I don't really want that person's recognition. I just want to be okay with myself and really address this, base issue of this old story that's telling me that I wasn't worth it. Okay. The other question you can ask yourself is, why do I care? Maybe you're feeling a certain type of way and then you're like, why do I even care about this person or that situation? Or why is this conflict even happening? Like, do I really even care what's going on in it? You can ask, what is my investment, or what is at stake through this conflict? What is my investment? What is my stake? What am I giving up if I lose this? What am I gaining if I win this? What is my investment? And then another question is, what do I need to express now? And you can pull yourself away from this and say, what do I need to express now to that person or to myself? What do I need to express that's causing this conflict? What do I now need to acknowledge myself, but not necessarily the other person? How do I acknowledge myself? Okay. And what do I need to say optimally, what do I need to say to optimally manage this conflict? Or what do I need to do to optimally manage this conflict? Hash Brown said, Jack did fit on the door with Rose. Hi, Abigail. I have to hear this from the beginning. Yes, it's a good one. We're just going over this the social and emotional intelligence aspect of conflict management. So asking yourself, what did I need to say, or what did I need to do? If you've ever been in a conversation and then later on you're like, man, I should have said this. You can still say it, unless it was like to jab the other person, right? But you can still say that. You can still voice, hey, we had that discussion the other day, and we were talking about this, and I just want to make sure that I was expressing myself clearly. And when you said this, then this is my response to that. But I don't know if that clearly was being communicated to you. The other thing is the last question you can ask yourself when you're sorting through a confusing or disturbing conflict, because these things happen. Difficult conversations happen a lot. What do I need to do now to believe about myself and the other person to optimally manage this conflict? Now, conflict management is very, very important for social connection. So, emotional intelligence is not just your emotions, it's combined with social intelligence as well. And social intelligence is your ability to connect with others, with communities, with your nation, with your family, with your business, maybe with the organization that you work with. Um, having conflict, having a good, strong conflict management, or at least understanding which style of conflict management to use is going to be important. Now, the Social and Emotional Intelligence Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence does have a test. So you just kind of go through 35 different questions and you rate how you would answer each of those questions. And then it'll show you, which style you have the most of. So mostly I have a collaborative style, but I also have an avoiding and compromising style. Okay. So I have a high collaborative, but compromising and avoiding are the second highest. They're just kind of neck and neck. And then I have my lowest is the competitive or controlling negotiating style. Like mostly what I'm doing is I like to have harmony in my negotiations, in my resolutions. But there's moments when that controlling or that competitive style comes in. And it's mostly when I feel safe enough or when I recognize like action needs to be taken. Like if somebody doesn't make a decision right now, we're going to have severe consequences. If somebody doesn't take action right now, we're going to lose, money. So like in my work, instead of, most of the time I want to make sure that the manager, everyone understands like I'm making these decisions for these reasons. Here's why, and being able to present that. But when there's not enough time, let's say that, I forgot to place an order and now I need to bring that item in super fast. I'm not going to sit there and, unless I need to get more information, I'm not going to sit there and tell my manager, oh, I'm going to do it this way. Like, I'm going to use a competitive, controlling conflict style to resolve it and say, hey, look, I'm going to own I'm going to own that I didn't send this. However, this is the soonest that I can get it in. And, I apologize for having to accommodate because of the time. I know that it's due tomorrow, but I'm not able to get it in until, next Monday or something like that. Okay. So this is how to effectively negotiate and to resolve disagreements. And these are, if you're lacking in this and this is an area that you need to improve, it's completely okay. Like everybody has areas of social and emotional intelligence that they can improve of. And it really is just working on each and every one of them and knowing where you sit with those and how to improve them. Okay? So conflict management, like I said, it goes into the management of others. How do you manage others? How do you manage your community? How do you manage being in that? A lot of people will just say, oh, yeah, communication is important. Yeah, it's important. But so are these other pieces. And in relationship management, when we're looking at how how are we managing others, you look at not just communication, not just conflict management, but you're looking at interpersonal effectiveness. How effective are you in that? You're looking at powerful influencing skills. Are you able to influence people powerfully and positively? Are they going to listen to you? You're looking at inspirational leadership. So inspirational leadership is having that vision, being really clear about it, and will people get on board with you? Being that kind of a leader. You're inspiring others to take action towards this one goal that you have, this one vision. Catalyzing change. Are you able to, pull people out of their wherever they're going and catalyze a change within that organization? Are you able to build bonds? Are you able to have teamwork and collaboration? Are you able to coach and mentor others into achieving a goal? And can you build trust with them? So if you look at that, that one chunk of other management, like management of your social world, that social intelligence, that's what it takes to have a cohesive community. You've got to be able to have a high frequency in these areas. Okay. Funny enough, when I took the social and emotional frequency test, I had some really high pieces, and then I had some, not, they were average. It's a score out of 15, and I think I had a couple nines, and one of them was coaching and mentoring others, and I'm just like, that's really interesting. So, I take that information and I'm like, how can I more effectively coach and mentor others? Because there comes a point in time in your life where, the information that you've learned, the information that you've gained is going to be important to share with others. And I will say in the last couple weeks, like I've been on fire. There's been a few people that I've talked to that they're just like blown away with how much I've catalyzed change in their own thought process because I've helped them to reframe the way that they see things. So it takes time and it takes dedication to really improve these aspects. All right. Well, I'm glad I was able to pop on. I felt, I was like, man, I really need to come on and talk to the people. And so thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that this is inspirational to you and it gives you a better idea of how do I better manage conflict? How can I raise my vibration or my frequency in this area so that I can effectively negotiate, that I can have a difficult conversation and know that there's these different styles of conflict management that I can use to figure out what the best solution is for. And knowing that just because some might seem that it's not like you're avoiding not just yourself but others, but that it does hold a value in some certain areas of conflict management. So I'm glad to bring that to you guys, and yeah, I hope it was good for you. Thank you guys so much for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you feel led to, you can go to my Buy Me a Coffee. I think it's in one of my links in the YouTube description or my main channel. You can definitely go there. Please go there and follow me on my socials. I have Substack, Facebook, Instagram, I think, on there, and I would love to see you guys come on there and comment. I actually like YouTube as my platform the most, because of the long discussions that we can have. But I also like to put stories onto Facebook for some reason. It just feels good. And I think I'll probably put my LinkedIn on there as well. So, yeah, have a wonderful day. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And like I said, I hope this helps with conflict management in your life, or maybe just improves you in a little bit of the step of the way on being a better negotiator, being more effective in your communications with others, and to be a really solid conflict manager, because we've got a lot of conflict. So really attuning into the people around you and making sure that you're, you know, being a win-win generator, and not perpetuating the conflict that we see. All right. Well, cheers, guys. Bye.